Hello Chain Gang, welcome back to the 4 Chains and Top 5 Friday. Today's list of the 5 greatest golfers of all time. The shout out goes to Nico Casillas and Jesse Dan. If you like reading comments, you know that these guys sometimes disagree with me and sometimes agree with me, but they always disagree with each other, so the most entertaining part of this video might be the comments eventually. But if you have a top 5 list that you want, the way it works is you just put a suggestion in the comments and we will do it. Next week's video will be for Heather and Craig, but there will be a 1-week break because next week we are going on one of our Patreon trips. Where we go to Mexico or Italy or Las Vegas and we invite our Patreons and we film a really fun video. This one will be Mexico. So we will see you in 2 weeks with that, but there's a great Mexico video coming. So let's talk about golf. We've done sports lists before, and I would say that golf is the hardest one to pick a top 5. And the reason is because, hey, in all sports, everybody gets bigger, stronger, faster all the time. Jim Brown just recently passed away and everybody's talking about him as the greatest running back of all time. But of course, Jim Brown with those skills could never make an NFL team today. Back then, his speed and strength was enough to dominate. Today, it would not be enough to make a team. So you have to judge people against their contemporaries. And a lot of people like to say, oh, eras are different, nobody really knows. And I think the reason they say that is because they want to ignore facts and they have an agenda. They want specific people that they think are the GOAT or whatever. Generally, that's just not true. In hockey, I think we did a great job of explaining it. Yeah, there are some eras where more goals are scored because of the equipment of the goalies or rules or whatever, but you can count those goals, so you can calculate and adjust scoring for the era. But golf is a little bit different. Golf is the sport where I would say that the statistics have been altered the most by equipment. The equipment is so much better in golf now than it was there. The technology, the ability to analyze courses and shots, that it's completely changed the game. And that is a very difficult thing to evaluate. In golf, I would say that race plays the biggest factor because all sports are integrated now. And obviously sports become more competitive when they're integrated. In sports like baseball, there's a leveling factor because before integration there were far less teams, so the athletes were more elite. In golf, it's a little bit different. It's integrated now, obviously, but there is an economic barrier to participation from people who are not economically advantaged. It's very difficult when you're a youth to play golf because it's very expensive. So that's a big factor. And the other thing that's unique about golf's factor is that amateur golf is a much bigger deal than amateur any other sport. And so there were people who were all-time greats that were amateurs almost their entire career. There was a significant period of golf's history where amateur tournaments were included in majors, were considered a major, right up there with the British Open, etc. And that's a difficult thing to evaluate. It's also tough to evaluate back when there was almost no prize money in golf. If you were an elite athlete, like a Deion Sanders or a Bo Jackson or somebody like that where you could play multiple sports, you certainly would choose a sport other than golf if that's how you were going to make your living. So that has to be factored. I made a bunch of criteria here. This is the only sport where it was so difficult to choose the top 5. I actually made, for the first time in my life, a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. I've worked with them at work, of course, but I had to make one for scratch to make these very close decisions, and I want to talk about the criteria that I used. First, I decided from my initial research that there were 7 golfers that had a legitimate argument for being in the top 5. And so I took them, and I'm going to tell you the order, and this will be in descending order of how much I weigh these factors. Of course, the most important factor is the majors. It's like when you're judging gymnasts, of course, the Olympics has to be the biggest thing. So we looked at major victories, but not just major victories. We looked at second place finishes, third place finishes, top 10 finishes. We also had to weigh whether the major that they won was an amateur or a professional event. Then I looked at other golf tournaments. Just because majors are the most important, that doesn't mean other golf tournaments don't count. Then I looked at scoring averages, but only in relation to your contemporaries, because obviously with the advanced equipment, as we talked about, scoring is going to go down, and the added level of strength, and et cetera, et cetera. I also looked at how they did as a percentage of the total tournaments they played. They played this amount of tournaments, this is the amount of top 10s and victories, etc. And then I went back and I considered the competition for the various eras. And that's how I made the decision. So let me talk about, give 2 players props who are not in the top 5 real quickly, who were the other 2 in the top 7. The first one's Walter Hagen. He is the least famous of these, and if you're a casual golf fan but not a huge fan, you might not even know him. In a 5-year period during Walter Hagen's career, it was World War I. These cover the ages of 23 to 27. So not exactly the athletic peak, but certainly ages when you can win a lot of tournaments. Through those years, there was only an average of 1 major a year in that 5-year period of time. Despite that, if you only include pro majors, if you're one of those people that doesn't include amateur majors, he is 3rd all time with 11. And what's crazy about that is he only played 37 majors and he won 11 of them. So that's awesome and sounds like a top 5 kind of guy, but the competition just wasn't as strong. A person that became a star just after him is Bobby Jones. Bobby Jones remained an amateur for most of his career. He was the smartest golfer ever. He had a law degree from Harvard and made more money as a lawyer than as a golfer. But his amateur status, he wasn't even eligible to play the PGA. He retired at 28 years old, with the all-time record for majors won at 13. Granted, a lot of them are amateur, but to win 13 majors by the age of 28, no other golfer comes close to that. There was only 1 year of his entire career because of his status when he went pro that he was eligible to play all 4 majors. And guess what? The only year he was eligible, he did what no other golfer had ever done before or since. He won the Grand Slam, all 4 majors in a calendar year. In 1925, this is the thing that really made me want to put him in the top 10, but I just couldn't. In 1925, he was looking for his ball in the rough, and he at a major championship, and he brushed the grass, and it made the ball visible, and he felt like that gave him an advantage on the next shot. He asked his playing partner, and his playing partner said, no, that's not a penalty. No, not a 1-stroke penalty. So he played the hole and he finished in a tie for first. But he went to the officials and asked that his playing partner be overruled. All 3 officials decided that it was not a penalty. But in the end, Bobby Jones just had too much respect for the rules of golf, and he assessed himself a penalty anyways, and it cost him his 14th major. The way it happened is such a great thing. They made 2 movies about it. One's called Bobby Jones, A Stroke of Genius, and one is called, of course, The Legend of Bagger Vance. So he misses the top 5, but he certainly has my respect. This is not a ranking of character, however. It's a ranking of accomplishments, and he just misses there. Number 5 is Arnold Palmer. You know, we talked about the period of time when amateurs were majors, and it wasn't really that much different from professional majors because the prize money was so low. Arnold Palmer's the main person who changed that. Now, he had the help of television. Television now existed, and the big 3, Arnold Palmer, Gary Player, and Jack Nicklaus, became huge stars. And from the late 50s through the 60s, because of that television revenue and just the overall explosion of popularity that caused in golf, prize money quadrupled. And make no mistake about it, of those three at the time, Arnold Palmer was by far the biggest star. One of the things I get the feeling when I see lists on TV or on YouTube or whatever is that people decide their list and then build a criteria to justify it after they've decided their list. I didn't do that. And I do the opposite. I make the criteria and see where the chips fall. So one of the criteria was not which of these golfers invented the coolest drink. If it was, maybe Arnold Palmer would be higher because he invented, of course, the Arnold Palmer, which is lemonade and iced tea. I'm sure you all know that. I would think that it's possible that even though he's number 5, 100 years from now, he'll be the most famous because of that drink. Arnold Palmer won 7 majors. He's the first golfer to become a millionaire, which brought a lot of people in the sport. He won 60 PGA tournaments, so you know that's pretty high. You've only got Jack and Tiger and Sam Snead ahead of him there. He is the only person to win 6 tournaments in a single year, 4 years in a row. And I would say that in the end, he really was rewarded for it because he was worth $875 million, which is unheard of for an athlete in any sport who started their career in the 50s. I want to say something about Arnold Palmer's dad. Yeah. We're not counting character here, but our next list, which we're dedicating to Heather and Craig, is going to be the top 5 parenting tips because Angie and I have been very successful as parents. Deacon Palmer could probably do a similar video if he was still with us. He helped build Latrobe Golf Course, and he managed the greens for 50 years. That did not qualify him in the golf's kind of an interesting value system to play during peak hours or to even use the pool. How did Arnold deal with this slight to pride for a man who clearly deserved to be a member there more than anybody else? He just bought the golf course and put his dad in charge. Hell yeah, Arnie. That's why Arnie's fans are called Arnie's Army. Sign me up for that army. You know, did his father deserve that kind of loyalty? Well, let me tell you how he got his name Deacon. There was a black guy being harassed by what I'm going to assume are white guys. And I'm going to assume he was being harassed just simply because of the color of his skin. Deacon, of course, he wasn't known as Deacon there. That was the name of the African-American fellow that was being harassed. Arnold Palmer's dad's real name is Milford. Almost nobody knows that. He stepped in, got in all of their faces, and allowed Deacon to escape. Deacon escaped, but Milford did not. The entire town nicknamed him Deacon or Deke from then on because they thought that sympathizing with another race was the biggest insult you could possibly give somebody. But Milford did not take it as an insult. When he moved on and his son became the most powerful and famous golfer in the world, he kept that nickname. He kept it for his entire life as a badge of honor. Did he deserve the loyalty of Arnold buying that club for him? Yeah, he did. Honestly, I think he kind of lucked out because Milford is just an awful name. No offense if you're named Milford, you know I'm correct. So Arnold Palmer at number 5. Number 4, Ben Hogan. Ben Hogan is, a lot of golf lists have a lot of similarities, but Ben Hogan is way up and down the board. And the reason is 1949. He was in a car accident which almost took his life, and it limited his ability to travel for the rest of his life because of blood clots and whatnot and his physical condition. So he almost never had the opportunity to play the PGA Championship or, of course, the British Open. The people that rank him very highly believe that if it weren't for that car accident, he might be considered the greatest golfer who ever lived. Do they have justification? Well, let's talk about it. He played the British Open once, and the only time he played it, he won it. He won every major that he played that year, but because of his health, he couldn't travel and play the PGA. And if he would have won the Grand Slam that year, him and Bobby Jones would be the only guys who've done it, and he would be more famous. So let's talk about the chances that he could have won that or a lot more majors if it wasn't for that car accident. In a 17-year span, he was only able to play 32 majors. He won 9 of those majors. In 3 of the other majors, he lost in a playoff. So he was tied for the lead or won it in regulation in 12 of the 32 majors that he played. How consistent was he? Well, let's talk about those majors. 32 majors in 17 years, and he finished in the top 10 32 times. That is a percentage of top 10 in majors of, take the 9, carry the 1, of 100%. Does that leave him in number 4? In my opinion, it doesn't. It does, obviously. You saw the little graphic that said 4, Ben Hogan. Number 3, Sam Snead. He is the most quoted golfer of all time. Just Google Sam Snead quotes. His quotes are absolutely awesome. My favorite one, when people asked him, he was on a particularly strong streak, whether golf was luck. He said, yeah, you know, the more I play, the luckier I get. Absolutely, Sam Snead. If this was peak value, maybe he's as low as 7, but as you know, if you've been watching my channel, we do all our sports lists on career rankings. Sam Snead is tied with Tiger Woods for most PGA victories with 82. In terms of total tournament victories, he is in first place by a lot, 142 tournament victories. Now I'm going to tell you some things about Sam Snead that seem like lies, and in fact, I would leave it out if Google didn't exist and you could find out that I'm not lying. His first top 3 in the PGA Championship was 1942, and it wasn't just top 3, he won it. His last time finishing top 3 in the PGA was 32 years later in 1974. So in 1942 he wins it, and in 1974, when he was 62 years old, he came in the top 3 at 62 at a major golf tournament. So, was that a fluke? No, it wasn't. The previous year, when he was a young, spry 60, he finished in the top 10. The year before that, you guessed it, top 10 as well. So he finishes in the top 10 in a major at the ages of 60, 61, and 62. 3 years into 60, finishes in the top 3 in a major. Was there just something about the PGA tournament that was it just hit him the right way and blah, blah, blah? No. Let's look at the West Virginia Open. People like to talk about three-peats on this. He three-peated the West Virginia Open twice. Now you might be saying, oh, Jordan three-peated twice. Slightly less impressive, and let me tell you why. Number one, those were, shouldn't say only 6 titles that Jordan won, but those were the only true, not quite of Sam Snead. He first three-peated in 1936, 1937, and 1938. The last time he three-peated was 1970, 71, and 72. So he won this tournament 3 times in a row in the 30s and 3 times in a row in the 70s, when he was 58, 59, and 60. We know he was competitive after that. How did he do the next year when he was 61? He won it again. So his second three-peat was a 4-peat. And here's the difference between his and Jordan's stats. In between those years, he won an additional 10 times. He won the West Virginia Open 17 times. And just before you ask, yes, they only hold that once a year. Now, so when you hear that, you think, well, Sam Snead is the greatest golfer of all time. And there are some old school people that feel that way. I'll tell you why he's not. He's not because he only won 7 majors. Now, part of it was not his fault. His athletic peak, everybody's athletic peak, is 28 to 33. During that period of time, we had World War II. 14 of those majors were canceled during Sam Snead's athletic peak. So it's pretty safe to say he would have won more than 7. But part of it is Sam Snead's fault, and that's why he's number 3 and not Deuce or 1, because he never won the US Open. He had 12 top 10s, he had 4 runners-up, but he never won it. And it's kind of tough sledding when you get into the top 3. Now let's talk about the top 2. I bet, I'm going to give a little pause here. If you're watching this, try to guess who the top 2 golfers of all time are. Did you guess Tiger Woods and Jack Nicklaus? Oh my God, see, the people who watch our videos are either psychic or brilliant, because I'm guessing 100% of the people got it. When I was compiling the stats for Tiger and compiling the stats for Jack, it just, during both tacks, I was like, there's just no way this guy isn't number 1. I felt that way for both of them, but we never cop out on Top 5 Friday, and so we are going to make a selection, and number 2 is Tiger Woods. But I am going to make the argument for why he should be number 1. Well, he had an extended peak where he had the longest extended peak where he was the best golfer in the world. And arguably, there's never been a golfer that's been better than Tiger during that peak. Let's talk about the numbers, and they're staggering. Tiger was the PGA Player of the Year 10 times. It is called the Jack Nicklaus PGA Player of the World, but Jack Nicklaus only won it 5 times. It's a point-based award, which I love, because there have been some horrendous most valuable player awards in sports. If I start talking about it, I'll add another hour to this video. And so that avoids these horrendous things, but it is point-based, and you accumulate points, and because Jack Nicklaus played a very limited amount of tournaments, it was very unlikely that it was very difficult for him to win the award. Speaking of awards, the Varden Trophy is the trophy in golf for the lowest scoring average. When Jack played, you had to play 80 rounds of golf during that year. Now they've lowered it to 60. But Jack Nicklaus literally never led the league. He never won the Varden Trophy because he just didn't play enough tournaments to qualify. Tiger Woods won it 9 times, more than any other player. If you eliminated the minimum amount of rounds, Jack only would have won it 8 times. So Tiger wins on that account. As I stated earlier, you can't compare the scores of today's players with the scores of players back then. But I'm going to point out that as evidence of that, if you look at 9 of the top 10, and I'm sure Angie will put it up here, 9 of the top 10 lowest scoring averages of all time for a calendar year, 9 of those top 10 are after the year 2000. It brings up a couple of questions. Number 1, how good was Byron Nelson in 1945? Like, what an outlier. That has to be the greatest single season anybody had. How could a guy with that equipment have the 2nd lowest scoring average, or 3rd lowest, or whatever it is, you're looking at it, not me, to get onto a list that everybody else is on from the year 2000? But another thing you notice is that Tiger has 5 of the top 10. How is he not the GOAT? And the crazy part is, I think there are statistics that are more convincing for the argument of Tiger being the GOAT. When you hear about his 147 consecutive cuts. That's not super, super glamorous, but this is a career value list, and he's certainly there. He didn't win a calendar Grand Slam like Bobby Jones, but at one point he was the champion of all 4 majors. It's called a Tiger Slam, so he did win 4 consecutive. Only the 2nd person ever to do that. But the biggest argument for him being on the list is that he holds the record for most weeks, consecutive weeks, being the number 1 ranked golfer in the world with 281. Keep in mind, there's only 52 weeks in a year. To be number 1 for 1 year consecutively is astonishing. 2 is amazing. He did it for 281 consecutive weeks. Whose record did he break? His own. He had previously had a streak broken of 264 consecutive weeks. If you don't think that's amazing, I'm going to put up the list of the longest streaks. There are 0 golfers on this list other than Tiger that have even done it for 2 years. Nobody's done it for, that'd be 104 weeks. Nobody's done it for 100. So given that, how in the hell can Tiger Woods be number 2 and not number 1? Well, if you're a true golf fan, you know why. Now, let me be clear. I may have misspoke there. There are a lot of true golf fans that think Tiger Woods is the greatest. Most of them would put Jack at number 1. If you Google lists, I think you'll see Jack at number 1 at most. But some people think it's Tiger, and certainly I think I've given you a lot of evidence to support that conclusion. But even the people that think it's Tiger get why Jack is number 2. But the first thing we need to do is talk about the greatest moment in the history of golf. I'm not going to make a list of the greatest moments in the history of golf because number 1 has 0 suspense. It is the last 10 holes of the 1986 Masters. And you can tell when people talk about this tournament, and there have been plenty of documentaries, multiple documentaries about just this tournament, you can tell the difference in emotion when people talk about it between the people that have watched it on tape or have read books about it and people that were watching it happen live, and I was one of those people. This statement is not up to debate. There is nobody that knows anything about golf that thinks that there's a chance that there's been a better moment. I live in the Washington, D.C. area. Thomas Boswell is the most famous. I mean, I guess Tony Kornheiser has a TV show, but the head sports reporter for the Washington Post for decades was Thomas Boswell. And the day after, the Monday after that last round of the Masters, Thomas Boswell wrote that there have only been 2 moments in the history of all sports that were both, and I'm paraphrasing here because obviously I don't have that 40-year-old article in front of me, but there are only 2 moments that were both impossible and perfect. One of them was yesterday, and the other one was on the ice in 1980 at the Olympics. If I have to explain to you what that moment was, you're not still watching this video. Let's talk about 1980. That was the last year that Jack Nicklaus was considered the greatest golfer in the world. He won his, you're going to flame me if I get this wrong, like 5th U.S. Open and 4th PGA Championship that year. But now he's in his 40s, and boy, Tom Watson was younger and still crushing it, and Seve and Greg Norman. And there was just this laundry list of great golfers that were just better now at this age. But it's the Masters, the tournament. And well, you can say the Open Championship is, but for Jack, it's obviously the Masters. In round 1, he shot a 74, so he's in danger of missing the cut, but this was actually the 50th anniversary of the Masters, and Jack's got a lot of pride, and he didn't want to miss the cut, and he shot a 71. So he did make the cut, but obviously well behind the leaders. Let's just skip forward. Moving on to Sunday at Augusta, with 10 holes to go, there weren't even television cameras following Jack because he wasn't on those first 2 sheets of the leaderboard. And he just had a moment that just had this period of time that never happened before and won't happen again. 46-year-old Jack Nicklaus shot 7 under on the final 10 holes for the Masters. And there was a moment on 17, maybe I can get the PGA to give me the clip. If they can, you're about to watch it, where he took the outright lead, but if you were watching it, you knew that even though he only had a 1-shot lead with a hole to go, obviously John Vandevelde, he could have lost that tournament. But if you were watching it live, you realized at the moment he put that club up that Jack Nicklaus was going to win his 6th Masters. That gave Jack 18 majors, 20 if you count amateurs, but he doesn't, neither does Tiger, and that's what we're talking about here. Does the fact that Jack has 18 and Tiger has 15, end the argument? Well, I don't think so, but Tiger certainly did in 2008. After he won his 14th major, they asked him if this makes him the GOAT or something along those lines. And I don't want to mess this quote up, so I did write it down, so forgive me. Jack won 18 and I've won 14. That makes Jack the greatest. If I want to be the greatest, I have to win 19. End of discussion, next question. Now, that seems very magnanimous of Tiger, but in 2008, nobody thought that he wasn't going to pass Jack. You know, he was easily going to get 19, and I think if you asked the 50 biggest golf experts, their average guess of the amount of majors he would win would be 24, 25, something like that. And then it didn't happen. Does the fact that Jack has 18 and Tiger ended up with 15, he's going to end up with 15. Does that end the argument? No, I don't think so. I think you have to dig a little deeper, and that's why I busted out the Microsoft spreadsheet. Winning is the most important thing, but it's not everything that counts. I developed a scoring system, and I'll put up the sheet here. 10 points for winning a major, 6 points for second place, 4 points for third, and 1 point for every other top 10. I'll put it up now. You see it, right? It makes it pretty clear that Tiger and Jack are the two greatest golfers who ever lived. Tiger has a pretty good, I'm going to put it up here, he has a pretty good lead over every other golfer there. Ben Hogan and Arnold are neck and neck. Sam Snead at 170 points. But Tiger has a 50-point lead over Sam Snead at 220 points. But when you look at Jack, he has a 157-point lead over Tiger. Is it possible to make up for that significant a lead in major performance with other statistics? Well, I don't think so. I think that, to me, that is a significant enough lead to make the Golden Bear, Jack Nicklaus, the greatest golfer who ever lived. If you disagree, let me know why in the comments. We want some debate. We're going to have a 1-week break next week, and then the week after that, we are going to put up what hopefully will be our greatest Top 5 Friday of all time. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know that these are not TikTok-length videos. I appreciate it, and we will see you next time on The 4 Chains, baby.